We've got some fresh new young talent doing some things that I know you haven't heard before.
1, 2, 3, listen.
Welcome to Finances, your home for all things financial, investment, money and lifestyle. Hosted and curated by the very talented team of certified financial planners, Burke Britton Financial Partners. This is the Finances Podcast, and we have guests with us today, Georgia Agar, founder and director of Agar Legal, together with one of my usual co-hosts, Delta Smith.
Hi,
Delta and Georgia, welcome to the Finances Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. Now, you were just saying before we jumped on that this is podcast number 2, so you're well-versed in all things podcast land.
Yes.
Now, what was the podcast that you did a couple of years ago?
It was a similar family law type podcast for sort of junior up-and-coming lawyers quite a while ago.
Okay. Yeah. And whose podcast was it? Was it yours or someone else's?
Victoria University.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's interesting how we're just talking off air again about how podcasts have really taken off, and it really isn't an industry or an area of society that you can't find a podcast and information about. It's a great way to get
information. Yeah, I think it's good when you're not doing much around the house or travelling or doing anything. It's a quick and easy way to get what you need.
It definitely is. Now, Georgia, the way our podcast works is we like to sort of go back as far as you're happy to go back and tell us a little bit about your background. Notice a couple of quite interesting key moments in your evolution in Agar Legal and also personally. So maybe let's go back as far as you're happy to go. Where were you born? Where did you go to school? And what ultimately led you down the path of moving into family law? So let's go back as far as you're happy.
So I was born and raised in rural Victoria in a place called Benalla, which is sort of northeast Victoria just before the snowfields. And I guess that my family was big into snow skiing, and that sort of led to quite a few things that I'll get to, but went to primary school in Benalla, and then I went to high school in Shepparton, and I went on the bus every day to and from Shepparton, and that made for quite a long day, but it was good.
So what's the population of Benalla?
Oh, I don't know. That's a Google question. I'm not sure, but it's quite small, definitely. About a quarter of the size of Shepparton.
Okay,
so quite small.
So what's Shepparton, about 70,000 maybe? Come on, Delta.
Put me on the spot there, Jay.
This is where we need our Google machine to tell us what the population is. What was it like growing up in Benalla as a kid? Did you enjoy Benalla? Did you know it was a small town, or is it?
Yeah, definitely knew it was a small country town. Well, I had friends, but I think getting to Shepparton and going to school in Shepparton was a lot better for me. And once I started school in Shepparton, I didn't really interact or mingle with anybody else in Benalla anymore. That was just where I lived.
Okay, you just left that behind.
Yeah.
So was Shepparton like the big smoke?
Definitely.
Okay.
Yes, yeah, and probably still is to most Benalla people. And neither of my parents are in Benalla anymore, so I really don't have any ties to it anymore. Shepparton is probably where most of my friends are, my colleagues are.
And that's what you'd consider to be home?
Pretty much.
Okay.
Yeah.
And in terms of siblings, have you got brothers and sisters?
I've got half brothers and sisters.
Yes.
Yeah. So I'm the only child of my parents, but then I've got a half sister and a half brother.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Great. And now you did mention, of maybe jumping ahead a little bit, that your dad had his own legal practice.
Yeah.
Now, was that in Benalla?
It was,
okay.
Yeah. So Dad's had his own legal practice in Benalla since I can remember. And then he moved to Melbourne, I think in about 1999, and opened, I guess, the second branch of his Benalla law firm in Melbourne. And that's since closed, and he's merged with some other firms since then. But growing up, I've always been in law firms, around law firms, doing the mail, doing the typing, answering the phone. But yeah, it's been my life since I can remember.
Do you think that, was it something, obviously you're around the law and legal practices, but was it something that you were interested in, or do you think?
Absolutely. Yeah. So, I always remember, it's pretty cliche, but the big wall of law books, like, they looked gorgeous. They fascinated me. Sometimes I did read them, did no clue what was going on, couldn't understand a single word, but very interesting to read it, have a look at it, look at these, things that were still relevant from, the 1800s. Mm-hmm. How could they be relevant? How do people still use those? So, yeah, certainly it piqued my interest from a very young age. But then I saw, as I grew, or as I grew up, I saw, I guess, the impact it had on my family's life. Not in a negative way, it just, that's the way that my parents lived their life. And law was not my first study at university. I went and did something else because I thought I can't be a lawyer. I just can't do it. But I've been drawn back to it, and here I am.
I was going to say, being around law for so long, you probably had an opportunity to see the good and the bad, and also the personal side of it, which I'm sure has probably held you in great stead in your practice now. But in terms of how it impacted you as you were going through sort of secondary school. So in secondary school, did you gravitate towards law, or you said that you started something else when you graduated? What did you...
So I went and I've done a Bachelor in International Business, which I graduated with honours. And I started working in that area, and at the time I thought, this is fantastic. It's, this is great. This is what I want to do. And after about 6 months, I went, oh, this is not what I want to do. This is not for me.
Is it because it wasn't what you expected, or?
I think so. I think it was just everything. And at the same time, nothing in particular. It just wasn't I wasn't excited by it.
Wasn't your passion?
Wasn't my passion. And university is, as I'm sure you guys understand, university is nothing like the real world. Yeah. So...
I'm giving Cindy a little wink there. She said, we're busy at uni right now.
Sorry, Cindy. Yeah, it was all great to read about it and think about The Hague and Europe and all these magical things. But then in practice, that's not what you do. And it wasn't glitz and glamour as I thought it was going to be.
So what did you think an international business degree was actually going to give you? What was the expectation?
I just wanted to, I guess, travel quite a bit and work in some big corporations, and I was really interested in the IMF at the time and how everything worked, I guess, on a really international, so a big scale. But that's not what it was.
What was it?
A lot of office work and boring stuff. Can't even remember now,
so
but it wasn't exciting.
Did you do some sort of work experience or graduate program?
Yeah, we did. So through my university, I had work experience and exchanges overseas. And in fact, part of my degree was I did quite a few subjects overseas in Japan. And I spent a ski season, so I worked my uni around my love of snow skiing.
So that wasn't by accident?
No,
you ended up in the
certainly was not.
snowfields of whereabouts in Japan?
I was in Hakaba, which was where the Olympics were in Nagano. So I spent 6 months over there, did a couple of uni subjects, and basically was a snow host. I worked for a hotel, did some cleaning, and also took people around on the mountains and just basically got to ski all day, every day. And that was a dream. That was magic. Didn't do a lot of, university, but I didn't do a lot of work. Came home, quickly wrote some assignments, and that was that.
Now, you skipped over something there. You probably didn't want to brag, but you were actually, if I'm correct, pre-selected and qualified for the Australian...
I was. Olympic team.
Olympic team, yeah. So tell us a little bit about that.
So when I was at school, I was too young at the time to go off to the Olympics, but we used to go up to Mount Hotham pretty much every weekend and all school holidays, and I was in the race team there, and there was a couple of coaches that came down from the Olympic team and we worked with them for a while. And
so for the uninitiated, what's the race team? Is it slalom racing?
It's everything, but my particular race was giant slalom and super G.
So can you explain that for us? Delta, do you know what a super G is? No?
I'm thinking it's some very big jump.
Slalom is where you go around the tiny little flags and you go very quickly, do really short, sharp turns, and then sort of the flags get progressively wider and further apart as you go. And then Super G is kind of just go down a hill as fast as you possibly can with no flag. Maybe there's like 2 flags.
So how fast is fast?
Oh, you get going pretty fast.
Are we talking like 60 kilometres?
Yeah.
Yep.
So full gear, helmets, as many body armour as you can without slowing you down. But ultimately, I was just too young and it probably didn't fit in with my life at that time, and so didn't go and do that.
Do you still ski?
Absolutely, yeah. Oh, just recently had a few kids, so that sort of put a dampener on things, but I'm about to head over to Canada at Christmas time.
Whereabouts? Whistler, Blackcomb, or
Big White?
Big White, okay.
Yeah. for about 6 weeks to do some skiing. Yeah.
Oh, and you're going to take the kids as well, or are you going over by yourself?
Unfortunately, I am taking the kids.
So you might be tobogganing rather than skiing.
That's it.
Oh, no, they're going to go to ski school and daycare.
Yeah, how amazing is it you can actually take the kids and pop them in some sort of a ski
Yes.
school or
Yeah.
what do they call it in New Zealand? Skiwi Land, I think, was in the Remarkables.
cute.
Yeah, it was very good. So mum and dad can just get busy on the slopes.
Yeah.
So do you ski or do you snowboard now? What
I'm
do
a
you do?
skier.
Okay.
Skier. Yeah,
Yep.
skier through and through. Can't do snowboarding. Actually broke a few bones trying to snowboard, so not doing that again.
Now, maybe just on the kids, obviously the integrating family in with this business we'll get to that you've now just had your 12-month anniversary of Agar Legal, as I understand it.
Yeah.
How have you been able to incorporate being a mum and having a family around establishing your own practice? That seems pretty crazy.
It's tough. Yep. Very tough. But I think part of Agar Legal was born out of, I guess, having children. So I had my first when we were just coming into COVID and coming into lockdown. And so that was pretty easy to manage at the time because I was able to work from home. Everybody was working from home and, that was okay. And then just as I fell pregnant with my second, we were coming out of COVID and coming back to the office. And I guess coming back to the office, being pregnant and having one at home, that was a bit of a shock. And at the time, I worked in Melbourne as well.
I think I skipped that. So you were you were full-time at a law firm from about 2013,
Yes.
is that right?
Yeah.
Whereabouts in Melbourne were you?
In William Street.
Wasn't it your dad's practice?
No, well, he did work there actually, yes.
Okay.
At a place called Agar Partners. And that was where I studied law part-time and I worked full-time. So I started, I guess, as the office clerk there at Agar Partners and sort of worked my way up and I became the secretary to the managing partner at the time. And while I was there, doing my part-time law degree.
It'd be a pretty demanding schedule working full-time and having that study load.
Yeah, it was. And so that was work in the day and study at night.
Did any of those boring tasks you had when you were doing international business help you in?
They did, actually.
Yeah.
They did.
It's funny that, isn't it?
Yes. So can't remember where I was up to.
So we're up to you worked at the law firm in Melbourne and then you were studying there, you did your law degree and at some point you maybe moved to Geelong and started your family.
Yeah. So, I think we moved to Geelong in about 2017 and I'd finished my degree. I was admitted. I was working as a lawyer, working full-time. I was just about to have my first. Then we went into lockdown and as we were coming out of lockdown, I had one at home. I was pregnant with my second and it was quite daunting having to go back into the office, I think, and travel back and forth to Melbourne. And also I had a quite difficult pregnancy and I wasn't able to travel as well. And I'd always thought, since starting my law degree, I always thought, well, I'll open my own practice at some point. That's what I'll do. But I think just being stuck at home and realising that I could do it by myself, although I did have colleagues to call upon and talk to, I was, for all intents and purposes, sitting at home in my own office doing it by myself. So I thought, why not do it now? What better time than any?
It seems crazy when you think, I've got a couple of kids.
I haven't got much on my plate.
Let's start our own business.
Just add that as well. Yeah.
So talk us through the thought process of actually starting your own business. Obviously having the idea and maybe being encouraged to do that because you've seen your parents or your dad have his own practice. But practically, what did you have to do to actually get your own operation up and running? So
practically speaking, I had to do a practice management course with the Law Institute, which basically takes you through how to run a law firm.
Is that a requirement?
It is. Yeah. Okay. So to be a principal or to run a law firm or be an owner of a law firm, you need to have done the practice management course. And then separately, if you want to hold a trust and run a trust account, I need to have done the trust management course as well, which I've done.
So for those who don't know what that means, so listeners, what does it mean to actually hold a trust account?
So a trust account is an account, a bank account where other people's money sits in. So that's not my money. So for example, when you sell a house, the purchaser will pay the deposit, which will eventually go to the vendor or the person who's selling the house, and I will hold that in my trust account for the vendor. So that's not my money, but I keep a track of it and keep a record of it and make sure I'm holding it to give eventually to the vendor when settlement goes through.
Pretty important to have some pretty rigid criteria and regulations around that. I know there's some prominent instances of that locally where that hasn't been the case, but I think it speaks a lot to the rigour behind and the importance of getting your systems and processes set up when you're actually going to establish a business. To me, it seems like another reason why you probably shouldn't have set up a business while you had two kids as well. It seems like you had a lot on your plate. Yeah.
And it's not a one-day course. It takes weeks. And as you say, the processes that are involved with it, you have to show that you can receipt money, that you can, move money around. Everything is recorded and must be.
So how did you manage to do that with the two kids? Like, where's the support? Was it your partner? Or?
Yeah, my husband. Yep. He's fantastic. Shout out to him. No, he's an accountant as well, so he provides a bit of support where he can as well. Yep. So, yeah, he certainly has been great support.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So you've done all your training. You've managed to fit it in around the kids. Bang, you've got a business. You're all accredited.
Yep.
How do you find your clientele? Like, where do you go to actually find people?
That's the tricky part. So I think, I've been a lawyer for a couple of years, so I've definitely got connections, colleagues that I've worked with. And I think sometimes when lawyers have acted for other people in the past or they have conflicts, then they refer me their clients who are conflicted, which is excellent.
Again, I'll sort of pause on a couple of these points, but what does conflicted mean for the uninitiated?
So I mostly work in family law. So if another lawyer has worked for a husband and wife in, I guess, a corporate capacity, sort of establishing companies, doing their sort of, I guess, wills, that sort of thing, when they separate, the husband might come to that lawyer and say, hey, can you be my family lawyer? And that lawyer cannot do that because they know they have too much inside information about both parties or how their relationship was. And so that lawyer then needs to send them on to another lawyer because they're conflicted.
So a bit of a line in the sand, and then from that point they have to find other solicitors to act on their behalf.
Yeah.
That's an interesting dynamic within the legal industry, isn't it? Because it's not as though lawyers necessarily, it's a little bit like our industry, that we're not necessarily trying to protect our own patch of dirt. We actually want to have good relationships with all of those professionals that sit around us.
Despite what people think, the law fraternity is very collegiate. We do a lot of work together, and particularly in my area of family law, I need to be able to have, or I must have, good relationships with other lawyers because, my job is to get the best result that I can for my clients, but at the same time, I need to impress upon how important that is to other lawyers. And so we need to work together to get the best outcome for everybody that we can.
You just touched on it before about the area of advice that you specialise in, and you mentioned it earlier that your growth, childhood, secondary and tertiary has sort of led you to the point where you've got some insight into that area. Talk to us a little bit about family law and why that area particularly has interested you and how and why you're passionate about that right now.
Well, I began in family law at Aitken Partners, and that was simply because that was where there was a job available.
Okay.
There was a space, they needed me, and so I started working there. But quickly I found that I really enjoyed it. It wasn't just a job. It was something that I really, really liked doing. And I guess I'm a problem solver. So when people come to me and say they've got these difficult situations and we've got these complex corporate structures that we need to unpack and make things happen, I find that really a good challenge to make things work and make sure that, I can get clients what they need and also what they want. So I guess it's like a puzzle for me, and I find it fun.
Can I maybe just ask, in terms of maybe simplifying for those people that are listening, what family law actually is? So what are the types of instances where people, because family law, I know even when we talk about it, it means different things to different people. Mm-hmm. So what predominantly is family law, and who are the types of people that are coming to you? What are their circumstances? Obviously, without giving away names of people, but what are the types of circumstances that you see presented that you have to problem solve your way through?
So I think one of the main things that people come to me initially for, it's not what they walk out the door with, but initially people come and they say, I need to get divorced. And people don't appreciate...
Make it happen.
Yeah, thanks, tomorrow. People don't appreciate that getting divorced is completely separate to your actual property settlement and dividing your assets and also making arrangements for the care of the children. So if you think of family law as sort of a three-pronged approach, and that sounds scary, but it's not. You've got your divorce, which is simply just dissolves your marriage. That's it. That's all that does. Then you've got your property settlement, which divides your assets that you had as a married couple, or in fact a de facto couple. And then you have your parenting arrangements, which deals with who's going to look after the kids and where will the kids live and who will they spend time with and where will they go to school and all that. And we can deal with the parenting and the property matters together all in one go, but the divorce is always separate because there's sort of time limits and time frames around that.
Can you maybe talk... Oh, sorry, Delta.
No, I was just going to add to... Is it fair to say that divorce is actually the third of those prongs?
Divorce always is the last thing. We sort of... That's an add-on at the end because as unglamorous as I'm making myself seem, that is literally a form. You fill it out, you file it with the court. That's that.
Can you talk to what is the time frame? Because a lot of people, like you said, they come in and say, I want to get divorced. Can you organise the paperwork? But there's a time frame. How does that time frame actually work?
So the divorce can only be filed with the court 12 months after you and your partner have separated. And again, separation doesn't mean that one of you leaves the house. It can simply mean that you and your partner have separated and sometimes you remain living in the same house but you're sleeping in separate bedrooms. And certainly with the current economic climate and the housing crisis and all those sorts of things, we are seeing that more and more, that people, husband and wives or married people, are continuing to live in the same house but they don't consider themselves married anymore. And so when we file that divorce with the court, which is 12 months after that date of separation, we need to file an affidavit, which is your sworn evidence to the court, that says that while we did live in the same house, we weren't married, we weren't together. And also during that 12-month period, sometimes people also decide that they might give it a go again. You're living together, you might think, I did love this person at some point, I want to give it another go. And you are actually allowed to do that so long as it doesn't last longer than 3 months. And if you reconcile for longer than 3 months, your 12 months starts again.
I was going to say that. When does your 12 months start again?
Yeah.
I think to your point, when people do think about separation or divorce, I mean, maybe intuitively people know that it's complicated, but we want to be done quickly and have it over with. I mean, emotively, it's probably one of the most emotive areas of law. From divorce to property settlement, I know property settlement has lots and lots of, if there's lots of segues and different connotations with areas of family law, property settlement has got to be one that is just like, it can be a can of worms, I'm assuming. So maybe talk to me a little bit about property settlement and I suppose what people can do to prepare if they're coming to see you and having a relatively seamless property settlement. And maybe if you want to touch on things that people have done badly that have led to difficulty with property settlements.
So I think everybody is nervous about coming to see a lawyer because everybody thinks that if you go and see a lawyer, it's going to cost you $1,001,001 and you're going to be left with nothing because you've given it to me. That's can be the case, absolutely, but I certainly don't think it has to be, and certainly that's part of my job, and what I really try to do is make sure that at the end of the day my fees are very reasonable and that the people are left with something because they've worked for it and they need to take that away. And again, that's why, and I'll touch on this later, I make sure that I have a good network of colleagues around me such as yourselves so that when people do walk away with some cash, they deal with it appropriately and they look after it. So a property settlement, or if people are coming to see me, it's a really good idea to have an understanding, if you can, because sometimes people don't or they can't, but have an understanding of what assets they have and what assets their partner has if they're different or separate to theirs, what liabilities they have and what liabilities their partner has, their spouse has, and also their superannuation.
Is it easy for people generally to articulate those things, Georgia?
No, it's not. So I think that it's really important that before you come and see me, if you can, take a minute to sit down and say, right, I've got a bank account. Here's this much money in it. I've got a credit card. Here's this much money in it. I think that my spouse might have a house, but I'm not really sure. Even if you can tell me that you think that they have a house, I can find out. So if you have an idea, I can go away, do some work and find it. That's a really good way, I guess, to make sure that we start off on the right foot, is to have some sort of an idea before you come and see me. And then I can talk to you about how we would go and deal with those things. The other thing that I really encourage people to do before they come and see me, and this is a bit of homework, this is not a 5-minute job, is to really think about what they contributed to the relationship. And that can either be financially, so what money they brought into the relationship, and that is at the start of the relationship and during the relationship, and also what they contributed to the relationship non-financially. So that includes things like being the stay-at-home mum. People don't realise, but it's very important that staying at home and looking after the kids is, in the eyes of the court, given exactly the same weight as the other person going to work and earning the dollars. Because that person wouldn't have been able to go to work and earn the dollars if you didn't stay at home and look after the kids, and vice versa. So they are seen as exactly the same. They're just given different names. So if you can have an understanding of the contributions you made to the relationship, that's also really helpful for me.
It's interesting when you think about, like I'm sure that, and I know because a lot of people will talk to us about it, that there is some sort of exacting formula on how assets are split. And to your point, why gathering together that information, and again, ideally we're not separating. Ideally we're not in a situation where we're presented with these challenges, but I think for anyone, that idea of a stock take of their personal circumstances, irrespective of whether or not they're going through a family law dispute or whether they're just managing their finances, I think it's so important for people to have awareness. And you'd probably see this, Georgia, that sometimes you've got one member of a couple that has very good awareness of financial circumstances and the other one maybe have very little understanding, and that can be challenging as well.
That is very hard. I think stereotypically, the person who stays at home and cares for the kids really can at times have no clue or no clarity about the assets that they own or that they have access to, or the liabilities that they have, the mortgages, how much that mortgage is on that investment property, or how much rental income I'm earning on that investment property, or if that investment property is even owned in my own name, or if it's in a super fund, or if it's in a company. That's just not something that they've turned their mind to, or that they haven't actually been allowed to know. And I can always find that information out, but if you have an idea or an inkling, tell me about it, because I can go and work it out.
Georgia, 2 questions. When do people generally come and speak to you, and when should they come and speak to you?
So it's a very good question, Delta. I think getting early legal advice is key. You should come and see a lawyer as early as you possibly can. And I even recommend that if you're contemplating separation, or if your spouse has said to you, I think we might separate soon, come and see me. Come and see me straight away, because the other thing I can do is give you a plan, and again, put them in touch with people like yourselves to work out how they can actually financially do it, because as I said before, the trend is now that people are remaining in the same house together because they financially cannot afford to run 2 households, can't afford to pay their mortgage, and can't afford to rent a separate house. There are things that we can do to combat that.
Okay.
So they should come and see me at the very earliest opportunity, but unfortunately they don't. They come and see me at the very end of it, and then I tell you that ends up costing them a lot more, because I have to unwind what they may have done and fix it and make it actually work.
I imagine that barrier around, what am I going to do? How am I going to survive financially is a strong deterrent for people actually looking to leave marriages.
And I think another thing that people think when you think about family law is that we'll be in court. That's it. We've got to go to court. We've got to litigate. We're going to be here for years and years, and it's going to cost me, as I said, all of my money. There are so many different options that we can do and that we can try before we get to court. Court is an absolute last resort, and I will do everything that I possibly can to make sure that people stay out of court, so long as it's appropriate. You know, at the end of the day, some matters just have to go to court, and that's that. But my job is to make sure that we get the best possible outcome for our clients, and we do it in the best way that we can. And so, as I said, we can do mediations, we can do roundtable conferences, I can be a shadow lawyer, which is becoming sort of a new trend in family law, which is where I sort of give my client advice in the background, but they actually go and implement it. And sometimes they don't even tell their spouse that they've got a lawyer. Okay. So I'm just more of the advice, the sounding board. And that, again, helps keep conflict down and also helps keep costs down. But that's only appropriate in certain circumstances. I can't do that every time.
You've alluded to it a little bit, but I understand, Georgia, one of your passions is around, helping perhaps women to generalise, leaving situations where potentially there's been domestic abuse and so on. Yep. Do you want to talk a little bit about your sort of connection and passion to that particular area? So
legal education, I think, is really important. So I do some volunteer work with Barwon Legal on the family law nights, and so people ring up and make bookings and I speak to them for half an hour at a time, which is really not enough time, but there is such a great need that that's all that we can manage. But empowering people, I think, is key. And, you can do what you want to do, and obviously you've got to do it within the constraints of what's available to you, but it should be your choice. Why can't it be your choice? And so working with people and making sure that kids are taken care of, I think is, really, really important to me.
Could you just explain to us a little bit more about Barwon Legal and the connection, locally in Geelong? I'm not sure if, Jay, you're familiar with what they do.
So Barwon Legal is the local Geelong community legal service, and they offer legal advice to people who can't otherwise afford to see a lawyer. It's, as I said, it's a community legal service, and so they only operate through legal aid and through volunteers. So they can represent clients on an ongoing basis with a grant of legal aid. So that's where the state pays for your legal service, your legal fees, and that would continue through the start to the finish of a matter. So you would go to them with your legal aid grant and say, right, I need you to be my lawyer from the start right until final orders are made. Otherwise, it operates on a volunteer basis, which is where I come in and I see clients. At the moment, it's on the phone. I speak to clients once a month, but the family law night operates every week on a Tuesday night.
Okay.
And I'm there once a month and I speak to people about their family law problems and just give them some pointers about how they can go about trying to fix it.
Now, you mentioned family law in those discussions. Am I right in saying that you also have put your toe in the water with some criminal law as well?
Yes, I do.
Yeah.
So that's sort of come about through intervention orders, which seem to be part and parcel of family law matters these days. So I do quite a lot of intervention order work, which again is another separate and distinct to family law, but that sort of led me to do quite a bit of criminal law work as well.
Do you enjoy that, or is it just
I really do.
You do?
Yeah, I do. It's very different to family law, and it's very cut and dry. Unlike, as you said before, there's no family law, there's no formula to follow, whereas in the criminal law, it's, this is what we're going to do and we're going to do it now.
Okay.
So I really enjoy it.
Can I just circle back to one thing you mentioned in the three elements of family law, the divorce, the property settlement? You touched briefly on kids and parenting. Can you maybe just expand a little bit about how parenting orders organised and, again, what sort of preparation people can do in thinking about how their kids are looked after in this whole process?
Yeah, sure. So with parenting matters, the primary obligation is to do what's in the best interests of the children. So parenting matters are actually not about the parents. We are really only there for the kids. So we have to do what's best for the kids. Now, obviously, I'm advocating for one parent. That's my job. But ultimately, we can't put something that just wouldn't be good for the kids. The court wouldn't allow us to do that. So what we're looking at is where the kids would live and then who they would spend time with in the alternative. So generally speaking, the kids stay with one parent. This is a very general statement, but spend sort of a week or live with one parent for 8 nights of the fortnight, and then the other nights with the other parent. And they can be either in a block or sort of a Friday, Saturday, and then a Wednesday and a Thursday in the off week, or, however it's going to work.
So is that essentially, it's custody orders, is that?
Yes,
yep.
Yeah. So we don't use the word custody
Yep.
because kids are not property. They're kids.
So
It's live with and spend time with.
Okay.
Yeah.
From a financial perspective, I'm assuming that's another consideration in working out how the division of assets occurs, and also how the kids' requirements, both education and housing and food, and how is that organised? I know we have the opportunity through sort of the family law arrangements to have potentially agreements that have ongoing, maybe binding financial agreements, potentially something like that, but also the use of child support. Where is the delineation between organising for payment for children through family law orders versus it being dealt with through things like child support?
That's a very complex area of law.
We better allow another hour for that one.
But I guess in summary, if the children are going to live with you on an ongoing basis, you will get a little bit more of the property settlement in the end. And that is of most of the time a sticking point for people. And that's where I think a lot of the fights start, because I think if I'm going to get the kids, I'm going to get another 100,000. So, and that extra money is, I guess, to compensate for having the kids, because you are going to be financially responsible for them on an ongoing basis. And then on top of that, we have child support, and that's administered through a separate authority, not necessarily or not through the court. That's through the child support agency. And that is something that you can absolutely do on your own. You just literally go online to the child support agency, you put in how much you earn and how often the kids stay with you and how often the kids stay with the other parent. And then the child support agency goes off and looks at the tax returns of both of the parents. So if anybody doesn't know, all of our government agencies talk to each other.
Lots of data sharing.
Lots of data sharing. Look at taxable incomes of everybody and then comes back with an amount that you are to pay in child support. And that is to cover things, day-to-day expenses. And again, with child support, and it's something that people don't often realise, child support is only aimed making sure that the children have the same living or similar living situation in both households. It's not to give someone else money for the fun of it. It's to bring one parent up to the same or equal or similar living standard as the other, so that when the kids move between both households, they will have a similar living style.
Is there, and again, I know I'm in danger of going down too much of a rabbit hole, but in terms of what you see predominantly, the people, and I might be totally off the mark with this, that when people are in dispute and can't come to an agreement on their family law, that they inevitably then leave it in the hands of child support? Or am I completely wrong with that? The majority of people would go down the child support pathway to actually organise the equalisation of remuneration, making sure that the kids have the same standard of living in both households.
Child support is not very much. So it's never a large chunk of money. So it's not something that we really use as a bargaining chip throughout the process. We touch upon it for sure, but it's not something that I really lean on very often. I'd use other mechanisms.
So you try and encourage people to come to an agreement that's fair and equitable before we consider child support. Yep.
Yeah.
So on a practical sense, let's say, mum and dad are separating or a couple are separating and someone's moving elsewhere. So I assume in that instance that party has to, buy furniture and bedding for the children. So that's all accounted for in the property settlement?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So re-establishing yourself is not necessarily accounted for unless there is a disparity in income earning capacity and assets. There's always a but in law.
It depends.
It depends.
No, it depends.
But certainly with the kids, then there's got to be some sort of compensation, I guess, to make sure that the kids are taken care of. And again, the kids would not actually spend time or do a sleepover with another parent unless there is proper sleeping arrangements for them. So they can't be sleeping in the same bed as a parent. That's not appropriate.
Okay.
So they need to be, their bedrooms and other living requirements need to be properly established before they can have sleepovers.
Okay, can someone tell my 6-year-old that, please?
Get out of my bed.
Get out. Now, Georgia, we're always at risk of talking forever on these podcasts, and I think that we definitely will need to get you back for a round 2 and a round 3 so that we can
I
maybe
could go on forever and a day if you let me.
Yeah, and I think that's one of our issues too, is that we really love the granular detail. But let's pause for a minute and let's go back to talking about Agar Legal and how people can actually find you. So where can people actually find you on the interwebs? And if someone was had some difficulty in their relationship and they wanted to come and talk to you, how do they get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I have a website which is agarlegal.com.au. That's AGAR legal.com.au. And on there you can leave me a direct message and that comes directly to my inbox, and if you pop your phone number in there, I can give you a call straight back. I also have an Instagram that you can direct message me through there if you'd like to, whatever's easiest for you. Or my phone number, just call me. I'm old school. I like to talk on the phone. It's easier for me.
People call you on your mobile or not?
Yes.
Okay, do you want to give you a mobile now?
Sure, it's 0408 622 550. And leave me a message. If I don't answer, leave me a message. I will call you back.
Brilliant. Social media and the law industry fraternity, yeah. I'm sure that's fairly foreign to your dad in his legal practice. How have you integrated the likes of social media and marketing into your business? Have you found it foreign, or because you grew up with it, is it been second nature to you?
I think it's second nature. I think we were talking about before we started recording, which was people get their information now through podcasts and doom scrolling, as I call it, on your phone. So posting on Instagram, people hit on it and it jogs their memory. So not only do I do family law and criminal law, I do, I guess, family planning type work, so wills work and powers of attorney. So that really jogs if I post something about that, people look at it, just when you're in bed scrolling at night and you think, I haven't done my will for 20 years, and you need to update that. Because the other thing is people don't realise that in the state of Victoria, the act of marriage actually invalidates your past will.
Yep.
So if you get married, do another will. Call me.
And the divorce doesn't? Is that
correct? The divorce
correct,
does not. No. So if you get divorced and you forget to update your will, you unfortunately pass away, you could have just left your whole of your estate to your ex-partner.
Yes. Not a good idea.
Also, they might have the power to pull the plug in the hospital, so make sure you update that.
Very good. A couple of other things. I suppose I just want to thank you, Georgia, for reaching out. I know that you've and Delta have had some connections with some other sort of financial professionals, and I think it's important to actually talk about how, particularly in Geelong, Shepparton's probably the same. It is the same. How important it is to have relationships with people that can actually help support you and your clients' outcomes. Mm-hmm. And so we're very grateful for you to come on the podcast today and tell us a little bit about yourself personally, but also about Agar Legal and also the connections you have in the Geelong and the Shepparton community. On the Shepparton community connection, I do note that you had recently organised and sponsored an event in Geelong that had some connection with Shepparton as well. Do you want to touch on that?
Yeah, I can talk briefly about that. So it's actually coming up probably once this podcast comes out, it'll have already taken place.
So what date is it?
It's the 28th of August.
Okay.
So it's an event organised through an organisation called Eat Up Australia, which is an organisation founded in Shepparton by a bloke that I went to school with in my year level.
Do you want to give him a shout out? Who's that?
Yeah, Lyndon Galea.
Shout out to you, Lyndon.
He started Eat Up Australia, and pretty simple but very, very important concept. They make sandwiches for kids at schools who go to school without food. So the event that I'm sponsoring is that we simply get together and we make a bunch of sandwiches, and those sandwiches get distributed to local schools.
In Geelong or Shepparton?
In Geelong.
Okay.
Yep. So wherever the event is held is where the sandwiches will go.
And do you know where the event is being held?
Yeah, it's going to be at Deakin Waterfront Campus.
On the 28th of August.
Yeah.
Okay, so if someone wanted to get involved in that event.
So this particular event is just for legal professionals. So it's a bit of as I said, an event for us to all get together, all us lawyers in Geelong to get together and do something good for our local community. But you lawyers and accountants and people such as yourselves can buy tickets through Eventbrite, and I can give the link for that too if you guys want to put that in the show notes.
For sure.
But we will be hosting. It's been really, everyone's been so excited about it. So I really want to do it again for just the general community to come along.
Brilliant.
Yep.
Can people donate if they can't get along or buy tickets? Is the organisation...
Absolutely. Yeah. On the day there'll be a code for people to donate, but again, I can give you the link for that too.
Okay. Brilliant. Georgia, thanks again for your time today. Is there anything in closing you'd like to say to our listeners or to anyone out there?
I don't think so.
Okay. Well, Delta, any closing comments from yourself?
No, it's just been brilliant having you on, and thanks for sharing your journey with us.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks, Georgia.
Thanks.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode. If you're keen to understand more about how financial advice could benefit you, follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter at Burke Britain FP, or Google Burke Britain Financial Partners. Check out our client reviews, testimonials, and make a time to meet one of our certified financial planners by clicking Book Now on our website. Thanks for listening.
Any information contained in this podcast is of a general nature only. No account was taken as to the objectives, financial situation, or needs of any particular person. Therefore, before making any decision, listeners should consider the appropriateness of any information with regard to their particular objective, financial situation, needs, and seek independent advice from a licensed professional specific to their circumstances.
All right, hit it.
That translates to don't be a moron and act on what some random person says on a podcast. Take personal responsibility, do your homework, ask questions, and speak to an actual human that knows what they're talking about before you do anything. PB Financial Solutions Proprietary Limited, trading as Burke Britain Financial Partners, are authorised representatives of AMP Financial Planning Limited, AFS, licence number 232706.